Being an NBA superstar doesn't mean that you're safe from jail. And in fact, there have been plenty of NBA superstars that have ended up in jail for some pretty shocking crimes. Some of these crimes include beating up fans during a game, getting into a brawl at a bowling alley, and even one NBA player driving so recklessly that his friend sitting in the passenger seat died. Sebastian Telfair was a first-round pick in the 2004 NBA draft, and big things were expected from him when he joined the Trailblazers. Sebastian surprisingly didn't make the starting lineup when he got to Portland, and things started turning south. In 2007, he was arrested for having a firearm under the passenger seat of the car, to which Sebastian pleaded guilty and had to go through a probation process lasting 3 years. Fast forward 10 years later to 2017, and Sebastian was arrested for a substantially more serious crime. Sebastian was pulled over in Brooklyn, New York for not having his headlights on, but it turned out Sebastian was also driving with a suspended license. After the police started growing more suspicious, they searched his entire car, and Sebastian was caught with a semi-automatic rifle, 3 handguns, and even a ballistic vest, all stashed in a suitcase in his 2017 Ford F-150. Sebastian Telfair pleaded not guilty, but the jury ended up finding Sebastian guilty in 2019, where the judge ordered him to 3.5 years of prison. Allen Iverson, a very well-known NBA superstar, found himself behind bars before he even graduated high school. Iverson was in a bowling alley on Valentine's Day in Hampton, Virginia with 3 of his friends in 1993. Seemingly out of nowhere, an all-out brawl began between Iverson and his 3 friends versus another group at the bowling alley. This brawl wasn't your everyday street fight, however. Iverson explained that the white man used a racial slur against him and his friends while they were at the snack bar. The white man said that they were minding their own business when Iverson came up to them and said a couple insults, ultimately provoking a fight. This fight came at a time when the community was already on edge from racial violence. Iverson ended up being sentenced to 15 years in prison for his role in the fight in an incident where nobody was seriously injured. None of the 4 white men who played a role in the fight were ever charged. The prison sentence sparked outrage in the Hampton community, where half believed that Iverson and his buddies were being punks in the bowling alley, while the other half believed that this was a completely racially motivated fight and even a racist court verdict. This was an extremely racially divided community in the 1990s. At the school pep rallies, black students and white students didn't want to sit with each other. One side of the bleachers would be the black students, and the other side of the bleachers would be the white students. Enough outrage was built up over Iverson's sentencing that Allen was granted clemency and released after 4 months in prison. The Court of Appeals eventually overturned the conviction altogether, citing that there wasn't enough sufficient evidence. Ron Artest, or today known as Ron Meta World Peace, has probably had the toughest history of controlling his anger in the NBA. The anger management issues first truly became apparent in the Pacers vs. Pistons game in 2004, where one of the biggest brawls in sports history broke out. When Ron Artest got hit with a water bottle from the stands, he knew exactly which spectator it was and went up into the stands to fight the man. This sparked an all-out stadium brawl where the fans were just as much in the fight as the players themselves were. The fight ended up getting so bad that certain players were fearing for their lives just trying to get back into the locker room. Artest was tried and convicted for his behavior during the game in 2004, where his sentence was to undergo community service and a year of being on probation. It doesn't seem Artest's anger problems got any better, as in 2007, Artest was arrested and suspended indefinitely from the Sacramento Kings after a woman said that he shoved her to the floor inside his home and prevented her from calling 911. Artest finally tried to leave in his Hummer, but not before the woman was able to throw a pan at the windshield, completely shattering the back window. To make matters worse, Artest's 3-year-old daughter was inside the house at the time of the incident. His punishment from the domestic abuse case was to undergo 100 hours of community service, a 10-day work program with the sheriff's office, and a $600 fine. Ron eventually legally changed his name to Meta World Peace in 2010, and then later to Meta Sandiford Artest in 2020. Things have been relatively quiet with Meta ever since. J.R. Smith was driving through Trenton, New Jersey with a friend of his in June of 2007 before the unthinkable would happen. J.R. Smith ran through a stop sign and collided with a sitting car. The collision ended up being fatal, where his friend in the passenger seat unfortunately died. J.R. in court admitted to driving recklessly and explained how this was a complete accident, where he expressed how sorry he truly was.
I am deeply sorry. I never intended this to happen. Never in my mind that I ever want to hurt or harm him or anybody else. I mean, Dre is like my brother, just like Jamal, Kenny, and Demetrius. I mean, he was a part of me at one point. He still is a part of me. I mean, he's always there. I mean, it always has been. And it just tears me up that it has to. I mean, it went down like that.
JR ended up being sentenced to 90 days in jail, but only ended up having to serve roughly 30 days. Comment down below which story surprised you the most.